Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're doing the 2018 end of the year Steam wishlist cleanups. Today we're looking at games starting with the letter U. Now, S and T were incredibly long. U and the rest of the letters to the end of the alphabet and just basically the end of the wishlist, because I doubt there are too many things that start with characters that would show up after Z in the ASCII sorting format, is going to be, all of these are going to be pretty short. We're already done. So this is going to be shorter videos, which is good. And we're just going to wrap up, and that's going to be the end of the year. Now, as for the reason why we're doing all of this, as I come over to the first game, basically, we have a Steam wishlist that is the point where I put games that I want to own and cover on my YouTube channel. At least that's what it's supposed to be. I ask, besides people who support me on Patreon, I ask people to support me by friending me on Steam and just gifting me games, whether it's off the wish list or if it's just a game they want me to see. However, that wish list needs to be more accurate. It needs to actually have games that I actually want to play. Unfortunately, some of the games on the wishlist haven't been games that I actually want to play. Some of that might be because my opinions have changed a little bit. Some of it might come down to the fact that I've just covered similar games, and like if I play one RPG like Skyrim, I probably don't need to play some AA RPG game that is sort of like Skyrim that came out 10 years ago and nobody ever has heard of. So a lot of it's like changing opinions, changing tastes. Some of it's just time management. And so we're just kind of going through everything and cleaning up. Also, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I stream Hearthstone and talk about video game news and look at every single video game that comes out on Steam. And if the game looks like it might be good enough that it deserves to be on the wish list, up until this point, I've been putting it on the wish list, which was a mistake. I should have been putting it on the secondary fall list. So now we're finding some games that don't quite qualify to be on the wish list, but I can put them on the fall list, and then next year will be a much easier experience to just look through the fall list and go through considerably fewer games and see how the reviews have gone. So this first game that we're going to look at is Ultimate Custom Night. This is the latest version of the Five Nights at Freddy's series. Basically, at this point, the developer never even intended for Five Nights at Freddy's to exist. He was actually trying to make a kids game, and apparently he could just not animate anything to look friendly, and it always came off as creepy. And finally, just by popular demand, he fell into Five Nights at Freddy's. It would have ended there, the story, frankly, if it weren't for the fact that big time YouTube and Twitch streamers got into playing Five Nights at Freddy's, and people like to see those players overact and pretend like they're really scared. I seriously doubt any of those streamers that played the Five Nights at Freddy's series actually were scared. They're just playing up for the camera, they're just being silly. So this developer, while he has tried to make like one game that wasn't a scary Five Nights at Freddy's game over that time frame, since he broke out and became successful despite himself, that one didn't succeed either. So he's kind of trapped in his own success. It's possible that depending on whether you are truly an artist or not, that you don't want that to happen. You'd prefer to be a starving artist doing your passion than to be a successful person and forced to do what is selling. I certainly have had some similar experiences in my life where the money was in working on something you're very dispassionate about. And most people's jobs are like that too. You're getting paid to do something you're not passionate about. And then that band you're trying to start up and go big with really goes nowhere. even a lot of YouTubers and streamers have run into that problem, and that's part of the reason why there's so much burnout between streamers, is that they get so popular that they end up doing something that they're not interested in doing anymore. Anyways, that's a long tangent, but we can kind of go on tangents today because this isn't going to be super long, and I don't want this video to only run about 10 minutes. We're looking at every single game, and in the case of Ultimate Custom Night, it's going to stay on the wish list, and we're going to look for red flags that might move it from the wish list to the follow list, or just have it removed completely. If a very rare case comes about, we might ignore it, which is a third option that's here if you logged in. That just for me means I'm never going to buy it no matter what. Or put it at the top of the wish list is my fourth option. Ultimate Custom Night also is basically just you custom generate a Five Nights at Freddy's experience, and it includes all of the previous characters and such. So I don't know why this free game actually wouldn't just be the one to play. Like, I don't know if you really need to play any of the other games. Honestly, I don't know if anybody really needs to play any of these games in the first place. So we're looking for games that are positive, very positive, overwhelmingly positive. This game has a rating for games that reviews that came out in the last 30 days versus the lifetime. This one's 95% over 6,510 reviews. These reviews that are being counted here are just the people who bought the game on Steam, not people who got it for free or redeemed a key. So it's the people that Steam knows have specifically put their money where their mouth is. If this game is in question, we might look at the developer or the publisher and see if a game is in good company or bad company. If we find out the developers made 20 negatively reviewed games and this one is a mixed reviewed game, then it probably doesn't have any real relevant reason to be played. If we find out that the publisher of the game has published like tons of very good games, but this developer hasn't made anything else, well then it's kind of in good company, so I might keep it on the free list. I probably, for the wish list, need to go and just install all games that are labeled at least free, if not everything that says free to play. There's no really strong enforcement as to whether you say your game is free or free to play. The general assumption would be, if it says free to play, that there's some kind of microtransaction in there or DLC or something. But Steam's not really forcing people to encounter that. If this wasn't free, it would have the "Is there any deal" plugin, because showing what the historical low price is. I have basically every plugin for Steam installed on Chrome, and we're going to use those bits of information from other sites to help us make decisions. Sometimes it's useful to see if a game is still being updated and isn't just an abandoned and dead game. Generally speaking, we won't look at the description of the game unless it's like a VR game and I need to double check to make sure I can play it without VR, because I'm almost certainly never going to buy a VR headset. We'll keep a small eye out on the languages. I see a slight tendency, if you find a game that is English and Russian only, or English and traditional Chinese, and or simplified Chinese only, those games have a higher chance of being a troll game, as Steam calls them. I prefer to call them very low effort games, just because I think that's a better descriptor. When we come down further, we have the How Long to Beat plugin, which will tell you how long it takes to play the main story, and the main story with extra, and play as a completionist. In this case, this game probably doesn't have any main story, so that would be the one reason why you might want to play the other ones, is that theoretically there is a main story. in here. As a video game critic, I'm mostly 100% focused on good single player experiences. So if we're looking at a game and it's just multiplayer, or it's mostly multiplayer, that's probably not a game I want to play. And if I found out, say, that this game could be beaten through the main story, if it had a main story, in like 30 minutes, and then if a game was like $30 and 30 minutes long, that would be a red flag. That's way too expensive. We have the Steam Charts plugin, which tells you kind of what the life of a game is. It really doesn't matter too much on single player experiences, but it might talk to relevancy if we see a game that only 6 people have played in at the same time, and it's been out for years and years. 11,000 as an all-time peak, so 11,094 people at the same time were playing this game is a pretty good amount of people. Even now, today's peak of 443 is a pretty good amount of people, particularly when you remember this is a single player only game, so this is really just a testament of how many different people are playing the single player experience. This kind of information would be a lot more helpful if you're trying to purchase a multiplayer game. If this was something like Call of Duty, you would want to see this number very high and this number very high, because a dead multiplayer player base means you really can't play the game at all. We have the Steam Spy plugin that tells you the average play time, which is different from how long it takes to beat the game. So this is everybody who launched the game for a minute and then never played it again, and everyone who left the game running for hundreds of hours. Typically you see the average play time be around a quarter to a third of the amount of time to beat the game. In this instance, I guess that would be, you could say 10 hours about of gameplay is probably the sweet spot on playing something like this. And then the average play time in the last 2 weeks is only 38 minutes, which is to say people aren't really playing it that long. And that's not super surprising, considering it's just a basic custom experience of Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's was popular. It's not particularly popular right now. People have moved on. The performance survey would be helpful if I was actually shopping, but I haven't been using it. We'll also want to make sure that games aren't in early access, because if they are, we need to put them in the fall list. And then if we're still in question, we'll come down and look at the reviews. Generally, I don't want to read positive reviews, and I can tell you pretty much every single positive review here is way too short to be that helpful. We don't want things that are just one sentence long, whether positive or negatively recommended. We want things that can be easily skimmed, so we don't want a giant paragraph. This is actually a pretty good length. It's concise and to the point. But see, a lot of these positive reviews also are people who've activated via key, and they're just putting meme short responses, which is basically the entire fan base of Five Nights at Freddy's. But one thing you could take from this is there's nobody here that is negative. I wonder if it's a free game, then they label them as activated via Steam key, because I don't know why people would have activated this via Steam key if it's free right now. I guess maybe it wasn't free at one time. Let's see, purchase type, Steam purchase 0, and these are reviews written by customers that purchased the game directly from Steam. These are reviews by customers that did not purchase the game from Steam. This may include legitimate sources such as other digital stores, retail stores, testing purposes, or press review purposes, or from inappropriate sources such as copies given in exchange for reviews. It's an interesting way to phrase it. But oddly, you would think somebody, at least one person, would have installed this for free. And yeah, this loading review thing doesn't work that well. You'd think at least somebody would have installed it and reviewed it. And this should count as you purchased it. But I guess maybe it doesn't, because I guess it depends on what your intent on the reviews are. So what's funny too is, even though there are no Steam purchases at all, what I just said is proven wrong in this instance. All of the Steam key ones are being counted. So yeah, Steam plays a little fast and loose about how their website depicts information, and they really don't explain it. I've just found out something new. Whether something is very positive versus overwhelmingly positive really has to do with how many people reviewed it versus the percentage of how many were positive also, so that's another issue. Here we can look at this developer and see that every single one of his games that he's put out is very positively. I believe that it was Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Simulator was the second game he tried to make that wasn't a Five Nights at Freddy's horror game, and I think he started off trying to make it kid friendly, and once again he turned it into a horror game. And then The Desolate Hope looks like it may be his oldest game. And this looks nothing like the Five Nights at Freddy's games. So for me as a video game critic trying to find the hidden gems, this would be the game from Scott Cawthon. Is it Thorn or Thun? Cawthon, apparently. This would be the one I would want to cover, and you can see definitely he at least started trying to make this kid friendly, and it just didn't work. It's kind of like if H.R. Giger or some of the other famous painters famous for making and sketching horrific imagery tried to draw something positive. It's just not within them and their abilities. I'm gonna come back and double check to make sure all of these are on the wish list though. The price is kinda high for any of these games though, particularly knowing myself, where I'd probably only want to spend 30 minutes on each game and play one game and go through them. So they really haven't been a high priority on my wish list for that reason, and they probably would never really be very high priority. I think they're gonna fade out of relevancy. The good news is Five Nights at Freddy's as a jump scare horror game inspired, hopefully, fingers crossed, it inspired some of the horror game makers to go in their own directions and tell more unique, more diverse stories. The Five Nights at Freddy's series, you're being attacked by animatronic animals and bears and things. That's the same thing for 5 different games. That's pretty repetitive, that's pretty boring. While there are very small tweaks, if it was a AAA developer, all 5 games should have been merged into one, and the gameplay mechanic and how fast things move and the time frame should have been sped up. Next game we have is the Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I'm thinking about getting into fighting games. I'm not sure what fighting games at all to play. This is true for, wow, I wouldn't have thought that there was partial nudity in a fighting game like this, at least. There's definitely some in some others. The The thing that is an issue is I kind of need to do a lot of research, and in doing the research I need to decide whether I really want to cover any fighting games at all. This actually looks like it's a pretty good a pretty good fighting game to try and break into, because it would have the Marvel tie-in, and that would be some good search engine optimization. It has the Capcom characters, which that might be a little bit of weirdness to add some change to it. So yeah, this is also rated very positively, where fighting games players typically tend to negatively review a little bit harsher on fighting games than anybody else. They're a little bit pickier, and because of the way fighting games are played, they're professional level type things. Also, though, a game like this might be really hard for somebody who hasn't played a fighting game. I bet this one actually isn't that hard, although this game might also be full of DLC, but I'm not seeing any DLC. Interesting. Apparently the ultimate part about this includes all the DLC. Nice. That price is not too bad, particularly when you look at the historical price of it being as low as $8.24. That's still pretty high if you were only to the level of wanting to play this for like 30 minutes. If you're the type of person who might put $1 in a fighting game if you happen to be in an arcade, that's kind of where I would be. Like, whereas serious fighter people are going to be playing it all the time. And so that's when the single player story modes come in, and it becomes questionable as far as how long does it take to do the main story of a fighting game. And you can see for how long to beat on this one, it's only 44 minutes. Whereas if you're going to do the main story and extras, it's 9 hours. If you're going to be a completionist, it's 116 hours. So I imagine it takes like 9 hours to beat the main story with every single character. And get different endings. The Marvel vs. Capcom series has a history to it, which adds some relevancy to it, because Marvel vs. Capcom has been a fighting game for a very long time. But you can also see Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite here is not reviewed very well. This is the built-in Steam recommendation shelf. Little row here. It's not particularly good, but because it points everything to just the top 10% of games, so you're not going to find any real hidden gems. More than likely, if I am going to break into fighting games, I would like to just play Dragon Ball FighterZ, and because that would be a game that I could play for a decent amount of time, maybe 9 to 30 hours. And by the time I was done playing that, I could take a step back and go, hey, am I actually into fighting games? Do I really want to start going down the route of trying some of the Guilty Gear games, the Mortal Kombat games, Killer Instinct? Or have I just been satisfied with that one fighter game, and have I learned something about myself where I just don't really enjoy playing fighting games? And it's not just fighting games that is in that point. There's also a lot of visual novels on the wish list that I've not really determined whether I want to play any of them. There's a lot of Western fantasy Tolkien-esque RPGs that I'm not sure how many, if any, I want to actually play. There's a lot of Eastern anime JRPGs style games that I'm not sure I really want to cover any of them, although there are some, certainly like Final Fantasy, that it would be kind of ridiculous if I never got around to playing at least a few JRPGs. Let's see. Let's see. The Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is... let's see. So there are some criticisms and some negative things here being said, but it's not too terrible. So I also don't want to see the 3 negative reviews and completely be blinded to the fact that the vast majority of people are enjoying this. 86% of 327 reviews. Also, if on some occasions we see some big gaps between what the reviews in the last 30 days and the overall lifetime, we might need to do some more research. But I need to be careful if, for instance, the last 30 days it said 50% positive. I need to read those reviews and figure out why 14 people, 50% of 14 people would not be happy with the game when so many other people are. There is also a point on Capcom to point out. This is, in my opinion, the proper way to do 3D games for games that were originally 2D fighter games. And when you get to something like Street Fighter 4, it starts to get a little bit too 3D, and it stops feeling like the style of game it was before. I think that there is something to be said about keeping your game looking a little too cartoony. Here's Ultimate Street Fighter 4. It's another great example. There's something to be said about keeping it cartoony and not embracing a super realistic vision of your characters when the characters are having violence enacted upon them, or they're enacting violence upon each other so consistently. But then again, I am also a fan of bright, colorful, cartoony graphics, so that may just boil down to a very personal opinion. Now, this game, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, is, I believe, a game that's mixed, if I was to guess. I think I remember the story here, where it's just full of microtransactions, and let's see, there's like a character pass that comes with the deluxe edition. You're paying $60 for a fighting game. This game has been as low as $25.53, and still that might be a little bit expensive. The premium costume pass, though, looks very suspicious, because then this looks like you're paying for the deluxe edition, and to get all the costumes you have to pay another $30. And the main story is 3 hours. A completionist playthrough is only 9 hours. That's a considerably smaller amount of time. Particularly, let's not forget, this game is called Infinite. So the thought would be that you can infinitely play it. Metacritic gave it a 69. Let's see what the negative reviews are. Let's see. It's a game, it's got bad graphics, sound, and story, but the gameplay is alright. Got it for, I guess, free would be the statement, but that's not true. And finished store, got it for /finished story mode, felt too long, expensive and forced, maybe just getting bored of the Marvel stuff. So Marvel vs. Capcom 1 is a poor, oh no, not 1, Infinite is poorly optimized buggy mess that is most unforgivably of all not fun. Not an ounce, 1 iota, or jot. This is quite literally Capcom pooping out a licensing game for not but money, and with no care or concern going into its making, and all without bothering to wipe. Okay, you don't have to get that descriptive. This is gameplay dank, story whack, graphics whack, music whack, roster whack. So, yeah, these aren't the most helpful or descriptive negative reviews, but in a fighting game, if it plays badly, it plays badly. And you can see that the today's peak is low, and the all-time peak for this game is low also. So yeah, that kind of sucks. Also, it kind of doesn't feel like Marvel vs. Capcom, which came out September 9th, 2017, Infinite, like, it doesn't feel like you'd have too many different characters than what Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom would have. Like, September 19th, 2017 versus May 6th, 2017. Just putting out two games very closely. I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a game designed for the Switch, or if this was older, I'd say the Wii. Of course, this also goes to show Capcom will certainly sell out, and Marvel will certainly sell out, and they'll just try to make some money off of their famous characters. And it's not like Capcom has too many famous characters in the first place. They definitely have a lot, but not a lot that they're actually supporting with games that are coming out right now. Like, let's see if we can just sit here for a second on the screen, or if it will move forward. Ninja Gaiden, no. Striker, no. That might be Striker, that might be Ninja Gaiden. Frank West from no. Let's see, I don't know who this character is. Astro Boy from I mean, not Astro Boy, Mega Man, and another Mega Man character now. Devil May Cry, there is a new Devil May Cry coming out. One character from the actual like Street Fighter universe. Couple other characters from the Street Fighter universe. I'm not sure he's actually from the Street Fighter universe. I don't know who this is. I don't know who this is, and I don't know who this is. And that's pretty bad when compared to the Marvel side. I know this guy, I may not know this guy. I know this guy. I assume this is Gamora. I should assume this is Vision, Mega Man, Thanos. Maybe this is Vision, and maybe that's somebody else. The Hulk, Miss Captain Marvel, Thor, Daredevil, not Daredevil, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, Captain America. So, at least movie-wise, most of these characters got something relatively recently. On the other hand, you could make the argument, why doesn't the Hulk have his own video game? Spider-Man's really the only one that has a video game tie-in. Why doesn't Ghost Rider have his own video game? Why does Thor not have one? Why does Iron Man not have one? There's some Lego Marvel video games, certainly, but neither one of these companies really are video game-wise supporting these characters. So to hurt their brands with a mixed reviewed fighting game is not a smart move. I guess maybe what I'll do on this, and this is kind of a special exception, is I'm gonna bump this game to the fall list, which I don't know how much movement this list is gonna really go, but yeah, I'm gonna put this game on the fall list. We'll see in another year's time. It's been about a year already. Maybe there's some way that this could polish up. Maybe if they get all the microtransactions and greed out of it, maybe if they turn it into like a Game of the Year edition and make it really cheap, that might convince more people to play it, and more people playing it might enjoy it better in from a different approach. Next we have Ultimate Racing 2D. I'm a little surprised that this is the first game like this I have seen on the wishlist, because there's been quite a few games like this that I've seen and I thought I put on the wishlist. Basically speaking, this is a game that usually wouldn't be on the wishlist. It is a zoomed out and kind of low resolution racing game. The thing is, there was in at least the United States and in my childhood, a racing arcade game that looked a lot like this. It was this top-down game. It had a steering wheel, it had an accelerator. I'm not sure it had a brake or a shifter or anything. And this is a different way to make a racing game. This also, however, is also a pretty easy way to make a low-effort game. Not a lot of people make games like this though, because it's probably not as easy as just doing a asset flip or walking simulator or a puzzle game. A lot of slide puzzle games coming out these days. So for that historical nostalgia and that relevancy, I was putting at least a couple of games like this on the wish list. This one meets my threshold of having at least 25 reviews. It's 91% of 87 reviews, so people like it. So I wouldn't want to pay $10 for this game, or even $7.99. We can see it's still getting improved upon. But yeah, this is the kind of game that will sit on the wish list though. It really would have to come down to a price. Giving 45 tracks is way more than the original arcade version of this. This is effectively a clone game of that arcade game. But it seems like it's being done pretty well. We could click on the developer and see if the developer has made anything else. They haven't. This is a slight problem on Steam where you'll click on developers and see that they just haven't ever made anything else. Not a big deal because this came out in 2018. Had this come out in 2013, I would have thought, oh well, this developer has clearly abandoned the idea of making video games, although recent updates would still make me believe that that wasn't true. It would just then make me think, well, if the developer is still updating this game after 5 years, then they probably have terrible time management skills and thus won't ever make another game. I really wish there was a plugin on Steam that would automatically just search by developer and put like a solo here or 1 or 2 to say how many other games this developer actually has on Steam or how many other games this publisher has. Steam has its own solution to it that's not a great solution, which is the Steam Publisher Beta. So the problem with that is when you click on a developer's name, then it can automatically take you to that publisher's page, and so you can't really see who of the company that made this game, what else has been made. You can just see of the publisher who published this game, what other games have they published, and that can be very varied. When you're talking like Adult Swim games or Devolver Digital, they publish a big variety of games, and it's not super helpful. And particularly when you're talking like a Japanese publisher, they publish tons of games. This is gonna stay on the wish list. It'd be interesting to see. Like, clearly not a lot of people have played it. It does have multiplayer of some sort, but I'm not sure if that's, well, it says online multiplayer. So if you wanted to play something like this for the online multiplayer, you're probably in a bad point. But you also, when we see recommendations like this, we'll probably see racing games that don't quite follow on the idea. Like, here's a toy that was available during my childhood that they've remade or cloned. So that would be definitely a different experience. Marble Mayhem, for example, has nothing to do with it. Bloody Rally Simulator. The funny thing is there really hasn't been a AAA racing developer that has made a top-down racing game. When I look at, for instance, yeah, none of these recommendations are similar enough to this. Like, I could see somebody putting a lot of polish into the textures on the side, the grass textures, the car textures. Even if you're zoomed out, you could spend a few extra $1 million to make these look a lot better. Get a nice music license to it. Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't run into another game like this, because I was fairly certain I had at least 3 or 4 of them. Anyways, moving on. Next we have Ultimate Tic-Tac-Toe. This is one of these games that's on the wish list more as a general idea than a specific desire to own this version of that. Ultimate Tic-Tac-Toe works by whoever wins this tic-tac-toe inside of this gets that symbol. So here you see circles 1, so then that becomes a circle. So then if circles 1 here and circles 1 here, that would make a line, and then you would win the game overall. There's a different way to play a different kind of tic-tac-toe that's similar to this, where if the player puts, say, a X in the center of the center here, then, well, actually that's probably a bad example. Well, no, it's fine. Then the if the X starts the game putting a X in the center of this, then the O has to put a symbol somewhere in this. And if the O, say, put it here in the top right, then the X's next move has to play in the top right somewhere. And so each movement then forces or allows the player to move further along. And I believe at that point, when you're playing like that, whoever just gets the first tic-tac-toe wins in general. And I'm sure there's some other varieties of tic-tac-toe to play. So this would be good to cover for like 30 minutes. An interesting thing. This also does fall into what I call a single screen Unity style game, made by somebody who really doesn't know how to make a character scroll or walk across the screen, and so everything stays stationary. And it's usually single screen puzzle games look a little bit better than this, going with the black green board textures and having the menu and the scores all like this is kind of even basic for me. I mean, it's really just barely staying within the realms of something I'd be willing to keep. You can see this recorder they used to make this video. They couldn't even get the Windows bar to not be recorded, and it's also not widescreen. Although, what are you really gonna do with the widescreen is a good question. But you could certainly have done something. You could have had the like a moves list. You could have had animation. You could have had several things. Could have just made everything bigger. Very simplistic game, but it's free to play, so there's not a lot to say there. No online multiplayer, it's just hot seat multiplayer. Now, here's a great example of where the recommendation engine will just fall apart, as they point out tower defense games, clicker games, chess games. There almost certainly is another tic-tac-toe game on Steam, but unless I go for a deep dive and type in tic-tac-toe, it's not gonna really come up. And let's see, there's a lot of bad reviews on this game too. So we could look at the developer Tigerfish Games and see that they haven't really done anything else since 2015, so it's not very possibly it's not very likely that they would ever release another game. I kind of question putting out one game that's free and then never doing anything else on Steam. Yeah, I don't see the idea there at all. You might put out your first game that's free, but you should, in the back of your mind, have a plan to release another game within the next 2 years after that point, so that if that free game gets you any attention, which getting attention is the #1 currency on Steam, you would be able to use that attention. So tic-tac-toe, we'll search that. So there's this game called Tic-Tac-Toe Lounge, and then it starts pointing you towards games that really don't fall under that category. I think Atari Vault might have an old Atari Tic-Tac-Toe game in it. Putt Putts and Fatty Bear's Activity Pack probably has Tic-Tac-Toe in it. But Fuel Renegades, On a Box, Circles and Cross, Egyptian Senate. No, I don't think any of these others really have anything to do with Tic-Tac-Toe. So maybe Tic-Tac-Toe is just too basic a game to actually be on Steam. You can see here, this other option is clearly a mobile port. While it has a little bit more polish as a single screen Unity game, it loses more visually by just having a very bad background added to it. Let's see, this doesn't 100% even feel like it is Tic-Tac-Toe alone. It seems like it might be trying to do something else. The camera's so zoomed in for this demo, I can't even tell what it's doing. Seems like it's doing a lot of visual things. I guess inherently playing Tic-Tac-Toe on a PC or a mobile phone is probably pretty silly too, and you could just do it on paper. And then Exo Box Circles and Crosses is like a brand new game. New generation of Tic-Tac-Toe in VR, available December 3rd. So yeah, this is a VR game that probably requires VR. I don't see anything here that implies that it wouldn't. So I could put this on the fall list and we could see if maybe it does change the experience. Of course, it kind of feels like at this point you're not playing Tic-Tac-Toe if you're wearing a VR headset and you're playing a 3D cube. Yeah, that doesn't seem really like like you're doing the same thing at all. And apparently it's 3 players can play at the same time. Well, I'm gonna put this on the fall list just to see if this comes out in, well, actually it already was supposed to come out according to the release date. Well, I'll put it on the fall list because I know I'm not going to be doing a lot of work here anyways, and we'll see in a year to see if this game is worth even staying on the fall list as a good VR game. I'm keeping VR games on the fall list though because I don't want it mixed with games I actually want to buy because I don't have a VR headset. Next we have Umbrella Corps. Speaking of Capcom like cashing out and not doing their licenses any favors, Umbrella Corps / Biohazard Umbrella Corps is a Resident Evil / Biohazard spin-off game that came out in 2016 that is 34% positive, and I think inherently it's a great example of Capcom's misunderstanding of what people like in the Biohazard series. They keep thinking that they can turn it into a first-person shooter, and this time a multiplayer first-person shooter game, and that's what people want, when clearly people want a resource management, over-the-shoulder, third-person horror game where you have to carefully decide whether you're going to shoot and where you're going to shoot. Of course, if you use something like Resident Evil 4 as an example, after you played Resident Evil 4 a couple times, you've unlocked so many upgrades and infinite ammo modes that's when the game becomes this fun experience for people who play it multiple times. But that's not the first story experience that most people are going to have, or that most people want. It looks like most of these zombies are stolen from Resident Evil 5 or later. Resident Evil 6 also came out and sucked. So it was kind of a big surprise that Resident Evil 7 came out, and it was rather different and a big improvement. 36 on OpenCritic. Part of the reason, though, that Resident Evil 7 is such a success is because the first majority, I'd say 2/3 of the game, was made by the outside of Japan teams of Capcom, and the inside of Japan teams did the last third of the game. And when you get to the last third of the games, you're on this ship, you're in this kind of creepy scientific facility. It's something you've seen in practically every other Resident Evil game, and it feels very much like every other Resident Evil game, where the first 2/3 you're in this creepy house, which really hadn't been done well since Resident Evil 1. You're dealing with very interesting, creepy, crazy monsters that are pretty much impossible to kill. And it really is going for horror and puzzle and escape. It's not going for fighting and attacking at all. I'm going to drink some water, so now might be a good time for you to pause the game and take a break. This will probably be the only break we do. On the negative reviews, we have the worst Resident Evil game in quote unquote ever. It only cost me $1 and I still feel it's not even worth $1, nothing more to be said. So this almost is a game that has some historical relevancy, where I'd want to play it just to show how bad it is. But is it? I don't even know what the single player experience would be. Like, if you were to get the deluxe edition, which includes the upgrade pack and I think the fashion victim pack, no, actually it doesn't even seem like it does. It doesn't seem like it includes the fashion victim pack. If you were to get the deluxe edition, really cheap, like free. This really should be free at this point. After 6 months after this failed, it should have been free. That would have been the point where I might play it for like 30 minutes, and as I'm trying to play all the Resident Evil games, it's really hard on PC to play all the Resident Evil games because the one game I really want to play, Resident Evil 4, just does not run without stuttering on my computer. I'm not sure if that's because of my video cards, the GTX 970, which has some defective memory in it, or if it's something else. It might be that Resident Evil 4 needs a special program called the 4GB patch, which allows the game to use more RAM. That might help too. Or it might just be something weird. All I can really say is it's just Resident Evil games and Lego games that I've ever run into the problem of the constant stuttering. And I had that problem in Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 5 was a little bit better. Resident Evil 6 was pretty bad. So it has something to do with how their engine is implementing something. Or, you know, it could also be me recording, but I've done experiments when I wasn't recording and it still stuttered. So I don't think that's the issue. Clearly, Umbrella Corps was supposed to be a multiplayer mode that was added on to, I would guess, Resident Evil 6. That would be my guess. Resident Evil 6 in particular was this game that was broken into 4 different sets of characters, everybody playing in groups of 2, so you always had this co-op partner and you never really were in any scary situations where you're left alone. And yeah, Resident Evil 6 felt like a very unfinished game, very badly done game. And I don't see a reason why it would have been rushed out. Like, we hear stories of video games that they get canceled, get restarted, they just work on them forever, 10 years. I would have thought that Resident Evil 6 would have deserved that kind of investment if it was bad. And frankly, had they just canceled Resident Evil 6 and come out with Resident Evil 7 and called it 6, it would have been fine too. Yeah, it's really kind of silly and a special exception for this to even be on here. I guess it also is worth mentioning that there is, while it's not being shown here, let's see, there is a Resident Evil bundle. So, let's see, where can we find it? Hey. And see, the developer of Resident Evil went on to make The Evil Within, and arguably you should play The Evil Within, or maybe even skip to Evil Within 2. Maybe try to play Resident Evil 4, skip to Resident Evil 2, and that's about it. I installed this Resident Evil 6 benchmark tool and it totally lied about the performance. It said I'd have very great performance, and then when I tried to actually play the game, I definitely did not. Right. Resident Evil 7 would probably be the one, but it's not here. So they've stopped with that bundle, or apparently stopped adding to that bundle. Okay, here's one. $126.93 includes Resident Evil 6, a ton of DLC for Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition, basically, Resident Evil Revelations 2, and Resident Evil 5 Untold Stories. So yeah, they certainly got very, very greedy with this series. And they needed to take a step back. Now the problem, though, as we look at Resident Evil 4, the problem we're going to run into is now that Resident Evil 7 has succeeded, the Japanese subsidiaries, the Japanese offices, probably are going to take Resident Evil back and now make Resident Evil 8. And if they haven't really learned their lesson, which is often the case, not just in Japanese companies where the management kind of just never listens and never learns and will just literally not believe what you're telling them, what their own employees are telling them. But that certainly happens in other corporations too. I've certainly worked jobs where I've told bosses and bosses of bosses, like, hey, what you're doing here is not good for the long term of your business. It's not good for anybody, and they just totally ignore it. The good news also about Resident Evil 4 though is that there is a fan project in development and close to the end that is remaking all of the 3D textures into a higher def version. So this is selling itself as being a high def version. It's still not that great looking. The problem though, is it's not officially licensed. We very well may see that as soon as Capcom decides, they will cease and desist the developers of that team. And even if it is never ceased and desisted, unless Capcom decides we're gonna hire these people and we're gonna use these assets and we're gonna license these 3D assets that were created by hand, Capcom can't use them. The legal jeopardy is too much. Even if they claim that the new assets, which are hand drawn, are infringements and copyright infringements of the original assets, all they could do is take them to court and say that the new assets can't be used, have to be destroyed. They can't say, now we own these assets, now we're going to release a remaster of Resident Evil 4. The only way they could possibly accomplish that is by hiring the people and saying, hey, let's just buy all your work, let's do this right and do this officially. And an unofficial mod, I'm not 100% opposed to covering, but if it's not on Steam, it becomes a big pain. It gets hard to point out how to play the game. My problem with Resident Evil 4 right now is not that the graphics look terrible, because they still look pretty good. It's the fact that it is full of micro stuttering. Which that's something that I'm hoping to fix as soon as possible. I'm trying to find enough budget to, while I am window shopping right now for video games, I'm trying to find enough budget to try and buy a GTX 1080 or maybe a 1080 GT or just a 1080 regular, and upgrade my graphics card. I don't think I need to go newest of the news like a 2080 with RTX or something like that, but I have a 970 now. I'd like to go one number better and stick in the 1080 series at least. Is there anything else to say here? No, not really, other than boy do I love Resident Evil 4, but also play it on the Xbox 360, or I guess now Xbox One backward compatibility, Xbox One X backward compatibility. I think this game is backward compatible. You might even find that it runs slightly better on the PlayStation, if it is on the PlayStation. I don't know if it is actually, in any form or fashion. The Wii version is actually kind of good, or well, not the Wii version, but the GameCube version was like the original version, and that ran pretty well. Moving on though, next we have Umihari Kawase, which is a action retro anime, I think, platforming game. Now this game is from a publisher I recognize, Degacia. They may be an anime studio, and this one just comes up and I see it a lot and it catches my attention, and it has some relevancy, but I haven't been able to quite figure out what it is, because this character eventually ends up as like this indie favorite, and it's in a indie fighting game now, alongside a lot of other indie characters like Shovel Knight, Isaac from Binding of the Isaac, some other things. So yeah, I don't know what this one's really all about, but it's a trilogy. It's rated 98% positive of 59. Is it Umihara Kawase is a girl who uses a fishing hook as a grappling hook. You need quick reflexes to swing away through a branching surreal environments. Now, I might have been a little bit afraid, maybe I should be a little bit afraid, that this game is actually too hard for me. I have a little bit of arthritis in my hands. I've probably complained about it in every single episode of the Steam Wishlist, and playing games like Super Meat Boy in particular that are designed to be difficult, that are designed to make you have to try over and over again and press a lot of buttons very precisely and accurately, that's not something I want to do. So best I can figure, it is in the fact that you have this fishing hook, a case where you cannot jump, you cannot stick to walls, so you do have to maneuver yourself in kind of a funky way. And I've seen and thought about games like that before and kind of wondered why I haven't ever seen something like this. It feels pretty old when you see that it came out in 2015. I guess we could look at the developer and see what else games they've made. Let's see, Blade Strangers, and there's Sayonara Umehara Kawase, which is probably like the third game in this series. Coda Princess. Let's see, I think that's a adult game. We may not actually do any adult games today. Let's see, RPG Maker Umehara Kawase graphic set. Interesting, selling your art assets or giving them away for free for RPG Maker MV, which is the latest RPG Maker game. So let's see. So Blade Strangers is the fighting game. Let's see, and here she is, more grown up, which happens throughout the series. And then we see several other characters. Let's see if we can get a lineup where I can look at different characters. Not really. So almost all of these characters, except for Isaac there, have more of a feel of the Eastern style of games. And yeah, this is, I guess, another fighting game. I don't remember this actually being on my wish list. It's 72% positive. It's kind of weird. It would be a weird choice to play this fighting game though, compared to Marvel vs. Capcom, where those characters are a lot more recognizable. So Sayonara Umehara Kawase, you can see she's grown quite a bit and she's gone 3D. I have a feeling that all these games came out a lot earlier than 2015 and they just got ported to Steam in 2015. The idea of a grappling hook game sounds like a different style of arcade game. This would feel very much at home in the old days of arcade games where it was very basic ideas, like Ice Climbers. This would be a good example of a game where you're mostly just maneuvering between basic platforms, and that's it. The surrealness of this world changes the feel probably a little bit, but not by much. Seems like you get to play as another character or two. Let's see. So yeah, moving on. Blade Arceus, on the other hand, is from Shining Battle Arena, is the anime fighting game. Another one to potentially consider, but also a pretty obscure one. And I don't think I'd get to this point, at least in the next 4 or 5 years, where I would play something like Blade Arceus as just a way of, oh, I'm gonna play every single fighting game that exists on Steam. But I could see eventually getting down to it. It meets the requirements. It's 81% positive. It has over 25 reviews. It would be an exception to not have this on the wish list, at least. Here's Coda Princess, which is only mixed reviews. So this is more of an RPG game, beat 'em up, and apparently people didn't like it. What's weird is this character in particular is animated to look very much like a different character from a different RPG series. Let's see if it's recommended over here so I can remember the name of it. I think it's Disgaea. Yeah, let's see. Let's see. A terrible game with unbalanced, broken gameplay, poor combat system, awful character design, and pixel graphics except for the main castle, bad storytelling. The attack buttons are A, S, Z, and X. 2, you can't change the controls. Terrible port of a 3DS game. They didn't even try to disguise it. Actually, one of the games on my wish list actually was a 3DS game being emulated, and it was being let's see, Code of Princess EX update is needed for PC, and this is a very recent one. So if Code of Princess EX came out to Steam, maybe I'd consider that. So yeah, I ran into a game. There was a 3DS game where the bottom screen was being run through an emulator and showed the whole time throughout the game. So every single screenshot was just the top screen, and the reviews were specifically saying that you could see the bottom screen and it didn't do anything else. Yeah, this one actually feels like it just needs that update. So if we were to come over here and search Steam, let's see if the update ever came out. Not yet. Well, this mixed reviewed game doesn't really have any relevancy, and there's no real reason why it would be on the wish list. Now, if we look at the publisher, the Gaisi, or how would you pronounce it? Digicea? Digica, perhaps? There's quite a lot of games that have been published by this developer. Do I want any of these on my wish list? Maybe Hatsune Miku has some relevancy. Space Invaders Extreme might have some relevancy. Let's see. A lot of these look like they're shoot 'em up games. I don't like to play shoot 'em up games. Here we have a dancing game that's VR and tag nudity. Here we have another one that's VR and simulation. It's like, I bet there's a long list of games here. A long list. In fact, probably too long to make it worthwhile for me to go through all of these and individually look at all of them, when most of them probably won't be added to the wish list. I am planning on looking at the wish list again in 2 years, at the end of 2020, and I can already feel that in 2020 I will have a lot of games, probably nowhere as many as there are right now that we've looked at, but I can already feel there will be a lot of games that at that point I will remove again, because my standards will have just gone up and I'll have made some more decisions, and that'll move things forward. In the meantime, during those 2 years, I have to hold up my part of the bargain and actually play games and cover them, which the irony of basically window shopping and with some slight e-begging, which is what the Steam wishlist cleanup is wasting or using a lot of time. It's not really a waste though. This really needed to happen. The wishlist was a mess, and this was either going to happen recorded or off screen, where nobody saw it. So much time was going to be spent on it. I'm seeing a lot of RPG Maker games from this publisher. I really hate RPG Maker games. Even the ones that are rated very positive, like Skyborn, that I tried to cover, my bias against RPG Maker games are just so high. Let's move forward. Hatsune Miku VR. This too is tag nudity. Like, man. Is there nudity in the Space Invaders Extreme? No. There is a problem with YouTube and Twitch, and I've said this pretty much every episode too, where they've become more conservative and tried to be more ad friendly, which would be fine if they just let me censor things and still put them up and get some kind of ad revenue. If I could put up an age gate on a YouTube video and then it would run ads for like alcohol or adult products, that there is an age gate advertisement idea that should exist on YouTube in particular, but that's not how it works. If you age gate anything and say that this is not something to allow kids to look at it, you lose all the ad revenue. That's why very rarely have you ever seen an age-gated game or age-gated video on YouTube. And if it is age-gated, almost certainly it wasn't age-gated by the content creator or the owner of the YouTube channel. It was age-gated by YouTube themselves. Meanwhile, even if it's not age-gated, a lot of games and a lot of coverage and a lot of videos on YouTube get demonetized anyways, for not falling within their nebulous, poorly explained advertiser-friendly guidelines. So, let's see. Sayonara Umahari Kawazi is the third game. Umahari Kawazi is the first game, and then the third game is Umahari Kawazi Shun Steam Edition, and that is here. That's where I thought it would be. And yeah, this still feels like a very very old game. It's rated E for everyone, and there's a female protagonist, so that's not too bad. This is the kind of a great example of a type of game where you could easily have it as a female protagonist or male protagonist. It's not likely that changes the story in one way or another. So it really just falls down to the artist, what kind of character they want to have. And this, for modern games, the demand should be double. It should be, hey, let's write a well-written female character, let's write a well-written male character, and let the player decide who they want to play as. And in this case, since this is an E for everyone game, theoretically, I'm talking players that could be very, very young, and just whatever their preference is, what makes them more comfortable. I'd much prefer them to cover whatever they want. There is some weirdness, though, as they age the character. That's not something you see a lot in a trilogy, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a hidden backstory of growing up in these games. But these kind of are niche games too. I kind of feel like I need to do more research before I would play this game and just see how well this was received elsewhere. I would say Costume Quest 1 and 2 do a very good job of letting you pick a character you want to play, because there is a brother and sister character You pick at the beginning whether you want to play as the brother or the sister. All the lines of dialogue are written so that either character could be saying them, and that it works perfectly fine. And then eventually your brother, if you pick the sister, your brother gets kidnapped and you have to go save him. If you're playing the brother, your sister gets kidnapped and you have to go save her. It works pretty well. It's very open-ended, very kid-friendly. And I think you could kind of do that with any game, or it doesn't always have to be that simplest, that difficult. In Minecraft story mode, there's a choice at the beginning. Do you want to be a female character or a male character? And they just had 2 voice actors read all the lines of dialogue, which is kind of crazy, because then that makes it where you need to play the game twice to hear all the lines of dialogue. But Minecraft story mode's not that long, and it would rather benefit from playing it a second time if you wanted to. So it's kind of a feature, not a bug. Let's see, next we have Umi Nico When They Cry, which is a visual novel that I recognize. And so most of the visual novels, I'm not sure I'm going to play any of them, but they are something I at least recognize by their name, although that might just be a catch-22 where I've put them on my wish list. I've seen them so many times on my wish list that I recognize them from that. And again, I'm not sure I'm going to play any visual novels. There's not the greatest of animation here. Also, generally speaking, it would be very helpful if a visual novel had full audio in English too. And the games were particularly short, because a lot of visual novels can be designed to go very, very long. Yeah, what else do we need to really get from this, though? It's pretty much, there's this whole collection. This one is question arcs, and we have a bundle here. So let's open this over here. This publisher, Manga Gamer, might come up instead. So we'll open that as a new thing, and then let's just click on this bundle. So there's another one that's rated very positively, and then another one that's very positively. So to play this whole trilogy, you're paying quite the expense at $25 each. That's pretty expensive for a visual novel. So while this would be on the wish list, odds are it wouldn't actually get played. And see, when I clicked on the developer, it took me to Manga Gamer, known for publishing lots of visual novels, some of which are straight up sex visual novels, some of which are only slightly cheesy, full of cheesecake and fantasy visual novels. Although Steam, unlike YouTube and Twitch, has taken the other direction. And see, I'm not gonna scroll through this. And when I clicked on Manga Gamer, it just brought me up to the same page. Steam has opened up and taken kind of an anti-censorship stance. So games that used to self-censor, and then you'd have to go find a patch from the developer's own website, or they'd just be censors in general. They've now started to update their games and go, oh no, here's the version that we actually meant. Here's the completely uncensored version that would have been available to everyone, which is fine, and that is the way they intended to show their art, and I'm fine with that. But as a streamer, it'd be nice if there was a free bit of DLC on some of these, or just an option in the game where I can say, hey, you know what, can you just blur it? Can you just put a black bar, some fuzziness, some shining lights over the parts that YouTube will be upset about, because that'd be really helpful to stop me from having to spend a lot of extra time censoring any footage that I would try to cover. And at the moment, games like this, if there's even a slight risk, there is this potential where I might play a 20-30 hour game, find out 30 hours in that it's got too much content and I'd have to cut too much. The Witcher 3 is kind of a good example of the opposite of that, where The Witcher 3 really only required me to censor out probably 15 minutes of some scenes, and I did it pretty poorly on the course of hundreds of over 100 hours of gameplay. But if it's the opposite, if this is a 30-hour game and I'd have to censor out 25 hours of that gameplay, that's not something I can show. Mutiny is an interesting adult game because it was feeling that Steam was going to disallow adult games that had already been approved and allowed on Steam, that they were just going to say, all you people get out, which was crazy because people like these games quite a lot, and they pay top dollar for these games. They pay quite a premium over a regular game. But there was this point before Steam decided to go in the opposite direction. They were kind of conflicted, but when it looked like they were going to kick out all the games, Steam said, well, if we're going to get kicked out, we might as well give the game away for free. And so they reduced their price to free. And so I ended up getting this game for free because it was just that for free on sale for a week, because they thought they were going to get kicked off. And it went the other direction. And maybe because of that stunt, it went the other direction. Maybe Steam said, hey, actually people liked this and installed this and took them up on their offer for a free game. Moving on, we have Umineko Gold Fantasia. This looks like a fighting game. Let's see. Again, probably a pretty niche anime character fighting games. It's, I guess. So that's kind of weird. Like, so the way it breaks down is the Questions arc is a visual novel, Gold Fantasia is a 2D fighting game, and the Answer arc is a visual novel. You usually don't see that. You usually don't see a big shift in gameplay styles. Let's see, what else do we have? We have Unavowed. It's a point-and-click adventure. I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventure games, and so I have a ton of them on my wish list. Really don't have a reason why this would get removed. It's 96% positive overall. It's really a testament to just how many point-and-click adventure games are on Steam and how many I actually do have a desire to play, in the fact that even under the letter U, where if you had thought about it and asked me how many games start with the letter U on Steam in general, I would have said probably none. There's probably nothing that starts with the letter U. It's such an obscure letter. It's just the English language doesn't have a ton of words that start U, but there was still enough to have at least one visual novel. And see, this isn't a visual novel. This is a point-and-click adventure. This is a point-and-click adventure game in a world where magic exists, and so it looks like a pretty interesting idea. Next we have Unboxed Newbie's Adventure. It's rated 90% positive of 196 reviews. I need to see some gameplay here because I'm not 100% sure what kind of game this is. It says it's an open world 3D platformer, but I'm wondering if maybe it's more of a sandbox game. I'm gonna drink some water, but I think we're probably close to the end. You might want to pause and take a break again though. So this looks like this is a game where you're rolling a box and running around the 3D world. I definitely recall that there was a game sort of like this where the goal was to like mail yourself and get packages from one point to another point. And I saw somebody speedrun it, and sometimes seeing somebody speedrun a game will encourage me to put it on the wish list. But often seeing somebody speedrun a game also means that it's a buggy game that's not really worth playing. This game was once a great game, a game I really enjoyed. Don't let my hours fool you. A friend had it before I got it. Now it's literally unplayable with no explanation and no reason. I've tried every step the devs suggested originally, have researched on my own, nothing has worked. Remove the game from my library because I'm sorry, this game has nothing but a generic platformer with a cardboard box and it's boring. If you think this is interesting, then go ahead and get it. I got nothing against people that like the game. Moving on. Controls suck. I'm leaning towards removing this game, which would make this the first game to remove. When you compare it to something like A Hat in Time and several other 3D platforming games that would have better reasons. I covered Grow Home. I want to play the sequel Grow Up. Here it is. Or Hob. Like, even these Ty the Tasmanian Tiger games. Yeah, when I think about just the other 3D platformer games, this one doesn't stand up to that. It's had an all-time peak of 64 people playing it. It's 5 to 12 hours of gameplay, which is probably not worth it. This came out in 2016 too, so we can throw this developer a bone and see what else they've made, but you can see they've not really made anything. Just the original soundtrack, that's a free DLC, and a demo. There is a game similar to this, but I don't think it's on my wish list, and I don't think I can remember the name, so that kind of sucks. But even at that game probably isn't that good either. So moving forward, next we have Uncraft World, a nudity Minecraft game that's in early access from 2015. This is a very low effort game that I was probably putting on the wish list because it was rated very positively, but the thing about that is it's rated very positively because it's one of these games where you do something that exposes more of these anime girls' skin, but probably doesn't go that far as like a full frontal nudity. This is $10 too. Wow. But see, if you are just looking for the lewd pictures, you might be satisfied with this, or it might be viewer manipulation, or it might be people that got it for free. And then a lot of these very low effort games, it feels very questionable about whether the anime girls, whether their pictures were properly licensed. Let's see. Artwork is great. Workshop includes 18+ content, which means like full nudity games. So it's really other people in the workshop adding that stuff. But a game company like this also doesn't really run the risk of getting kicked off of Steam because Steam just doesn't really pay enough attention. Yeah, this one is sexual content, adventure, and gore. And this one's rated 72% positive. So yeah, how would I cover a game like this? I don't know. 1 death in your back 3 rooms, the horrible controls, and hit registration. So yeah, while this developer is focusing on the more adult side, you don't really have to have that good of a quality of games, and so he's getting away certainly with selling games at a high premium that aren't that good. And that's not what I want on my wish list. I want my wish list to have adult games, if at the very least, so that I could purchase them and support the industry and encourage those games to continue to be made, because I'm very pro free speech and pro the artist's own vision. If that's the story they want to tell, I'm fine with that. But also I might buy those games and never play them, so they're not high priority on the wish list. Let's see, moving forward, we have a direct 180 switch. We have a very positive 97% of 153 reviewed game called Under the Leaves, which is tagged as a hidden object game, but I believe this is more of a kid-friendly 1 to 2 hour hidden object game. $4.99 is probably too expensive, even at its historic low of $2.50. Is of about $2.50 is probably a little too high. Let's see. So it's like animals in the pictures that is gonna be really hard to find, particularly if you were colorblind. This looks like a punish your child who is colorblind game if I ever saw one. And yeah, this is not well thought out for anybody with any kind of visual problems. Now, I'm not colorblind, so I could play this perfectly fine. I question the price. Certainly, I question $2.50 for at most 2 hours of gameplay, and it is a hidden object game, and unless a hidden object game is pretty unique, I'm trying to remove them. I think this one is a little bit unique though, so I'll leave it on the wish list. So I had an all-time peak of 14 people playing it at the same time. It seems like you can still make money doing that though, because you know, just every Steam sale, every now and then you get a few more dollars. Better than nothing, I guess. It's kind of like being a YouTuber. It's like back when I was able to run ads on my channel before they moved the goalpost and said I didn't have enough subscribers. I was getting like 7 cents a week on ad revenue, and I was like, okay, well, that's my hard-earned pennies there. It's better than nothing. It feels like at least I'm getting something for the fact that I'm putting so much effort into my channel. So it was really a punch in the gut when they go, oh no, you're not worth even getting that 7 cents a week. I'm like, oh man, that sucks. And so that's why I now encourage people to support me through Patreon, where YouTube doesn't get a cut. And if they don't want to support me through Patreon on a monthly basis, which, I mean, it could be as low as $1 on Patreon, but if they don't want to do that, or if they want to see me cover a specific game, I'm asking people to friend me on Steam. Friend me anyways, even if you're not going to gift me a game, but friend me on Steam and gift me a game off the wish list that we're now close to being done cleaning up. Or if you don't want to make a decision, you can also find gift cards on Steam and gift those to your friends also, and that would be very helpful. Moving forward, next we have Under Night in Birth EX:late. That's kind of important to know this name of the series, because there's going to be several fighting games under somewhat similar names, and I have not done the research to see if they are just very small changes on the same idea, or if they're completely new character rosters, or what. Again, this feels like it's a AA instead of a AAA tier fighting game, but it might actually be really the one to play, because I just don't know where the niche community of fans of fighting games, where they are right now, what games they want to see played, what games they think should be played. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure if I should make coverage focused towards that niche audience, or should I focus it towards my own audience of just general gamers. This looks like it might have a storyline mode, which wouldn't be super surprising. Yeah, 93% positive. There's no bundle here, which seems weird, because there like should be several games coming up with a name somewhat like this. Yeah, there's Under Night, In Birth, EXE, Late, bracket ST. The one we just looked at was just called Late. And then there's a whole bunch of DLC, and then it starts talking about like Blaze Blue and other games. So this should be the next game on the wish list too. So it's really only two. This one came out in 2016, so let's see what the other one came out in 2018. So it could be that this is a just slight update. It would be better if they adapted the standard numbering system. I know that they're doing something weird and unique with the name, and it's cool and all, but truth is it's gonna get confusing really fast, and you really can't do anything more about it. EXE:"latest." You would have to use bad language, bad English at a certain point, and call it latest more, even more late, or later-ist, or later latest too, I suppose. It does very much feel like this fighting game has its own single player storyline it's telling. There's a whole bunch of DLC. Let's see how much all of that adds up to. $83. But apparently if you just pay $29.99 you'll get all of them. That's the problem with DLC, though, is that it allows you to just add everything to your cart, although I think Steam will probably warn you and stop you from buying redundant DLC. They're still patching it, so this is not dead by any means, but it's not hugely well played too. This is a pretty small community of people. Melty Blood, actress against Kuriko. Another fighting game that I haven't heard of. I imagine that there is probably a lot of there's a lot of fighting games I haven't covered. The other thing I guess I could have checked here is maybe the in-birth part of the name changes things. Maybe if it's just Under Night, it comes out with more games. Nope, doesn't seem like it does. These names are kind of like half of the spin-off names for the Kingdom Hearts games. Then Melty Blood is a final episode of the Melty Blood fighting game. Seems weird to run into games that definitely feel like they are more of a single player storyline experience than just a generic, hey, you're in the Mortal Kombat game, and so you're gonna constantly have to fight against people to be the champion, which is basically the storyline for Mortal Kombat 1. It's just like, you're gonna fight, there doesn't need to be a reason. Let's see if we could talk about SNK heroines. What was it? Heroines. Like, I guess maybe that's not on Steam. Like, they recently came out with a heroines game that was just, I guess it's on PS4. It's just the female characters from several of, I think, the SNK series, and the reason why everybody is fighting is basically you've been kidnapped, and all the girls have been kidnapped and forced to fight to amuse this creepy old guy, and that's the entire story, and that's as good of a story for a fighting game as anything else. I guess this is the only one though that's actually, like, you're in a weird position here because it's just this game and that's it. There's nothing else that's on Steam. And it's from this developer called French Bread, which was the same developer as the previous games. So maybe, but I don't think they're the same characters or any connection there. Let's move on. Next we have Under Hero, which is 94% of 136 reviews. I certainly have taken my time on this and made this last a lot longer than it probably should be. A 2D side-scrolling RPG adventure game with timing-based combat, no turns, inspired by Paper Mario and other RPG games. I'd like to play a game that felt like a Paper Mario game. So that sounds like it's a slightly interesting game. Although, in all fairness, this seems to be kind of a darker style of comedy, where maybe a Paper Mario clone on Steam, since Nintendo games have never kind of come to Steam. Maybe it should be a little bit brighter and upbeat. I really wish a lot more games were kid friendly. We could take half of the good sex games on my wish list and turn them into good kids games, just replace them with good kids games. I'd prefer that. There's very few E for everyone or E10 plus games. So this looks good enough. It's from a company I don't recognize, and it's pretty much brand new, and it's already pretty positive. So honestly, if I had the budget, I very possibly might have played this when it came out, like day one. That's what I'd like to get my YouTube channel to, is just to have extra money in my Steam wallet at all time and just be ready to buy brand new games. But that's not what the wishlist is really about. It's more about leaning on the community and playing the old games. Like, if I have time to put a game on the wishlist, I probably at that point could also have pre-ordered it or purchased it. Let's see what else this developer has developed. Nothing. Not super surprising. You may take note that this Steam publisher beta, creator beta, if you are a new developer, you're probably going to use this completely. I don't find it very helpful, honestly. I don't find these new release shelves that take up the entire screen helpful. I don't find any of the other featured lists or browse or about things to be that helpful. Being able to click on games only instead and eliminate just demos, slightly useful there. Also, I guess if it's a publisher and you only wanted to play adventure games, then you could filter down to that on the secondary filter, but that's not a lot of filtering. There's no sorting here by price or popularity or date released or anything like that. You can see discounts and upcoming releases and top sellers, and that's about it. You also run into an issue when it's an adult game publisher that you end up on the publisher's page, and sometimes this is true for the Steam Games page itself, where the pages are just not family friendly, and the storefront should be family friendly for the most part. I shouldn't have to worry about clicking through these screenshots sometimes and just seeing a anime girl close to, if not completely nude, or partially nude, just because, you know, again, YouTube doesn't like that. Moving on, next we have a game called Underrail, which is an RPG. I think this one can be removed pretty quickly. We've gone through the wish list and we've seen a lot of Diablo clones, isometric RPG games like this. This one does not look great. It came out in 2015. The only thing I guess that would save this, even though this is rated very positively, I'm just having a very negative visual reaction to what I'm seeing here. So the only thing that would save this is if this developer has developed something else and they have some relevancy because of that. And no, it doesn't. And when I'm talking relevancy, that's only in part of what they show here when you're signed in. 30 to 112 hours for a game that looks ugly. No thank you. I'm pretty sure I own all the first 3 Fallout games, and that probably would make more sense. Let's see. Yeah, this definitely doesn't look good enough to stay on the wish list. Alright. What else do we have next? We have Unending Dusk, which is a brand new game and it's early access. So I don't have to really do any real research or look at the screenshots or anything. I can just put it on the follow list. And this may be the one instance where actually more games will be added to the wish list than removed. I've been saying I probably would end up doing that for some of these, and I certainly have added quite a bit of games to the wish list as we go through it, but there's only 3 games that are getting removed, and there's almost certainly going to be 3, at least more than 3 that are going to be added. But then I guess there's also 3 games that are getting moved to the follow list, so it's not too bad. Next we have Unepic, which says it's a Metroidvania RPG game. I don't think this is going to stay on the wish list, just again for the same reason, because it doesn't look visually appealing. It's 92% of 3,786 people have reviewed it positively. It's been as low as $1.49. At that price, it might be a much better deal. Let's see. So, a fan of sci-fi movies, RPG, and video games gets teleported into a Metroidvania type world. So the story doesn't sound terrible. Looks like it might be a little bit rogue-like or maybe roguelite. But again, the thing also that would fall apart here is I don't see how I could play Unepic before I played the game that came out more recently. Like, I've covered Rogue Legacy. I like that a lot because that's a roguelite game. The progression is saved. I covered Dust and Elysian Tale. That's not really that much of a rogue-esque game at all. Trying to think of the name of the game I'm thinking of. This game gets so infuriating, you can't believe it. I was really liking the game. I was close to anyone, got a unique item morphed and I can't unmorph it back again. It's a known bug discovered 4 years ago and the developer did nothing about it. Massive lack of customization for controls. Xbox 360 controller support for this game is almost as awful as the developer's attitude toward players in the forum. You have been warned. Okay, well that's enough of an accusation alone. Isn't it called the cross cells, crosscode, cells, dead cells? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think this could be on the wish list, or needs to be on the wish list even. It's again mostly the visual aspect. But when we let's just see what else this developer has made. Made a game called Ghost 1.0 and Mini Ghost, which I think are already on the wish list. So let's see that. Now, Dead Cells looks a lot like what Unepic was trying to do, with a large amount of weapons and abilities, and it's just not something that I think I could cover something that looked so much like that, although Unepic looked nowhere as good as this. And see, I'm not even 100% sold that I really even want to play Dead Cells. Like, it should definitely be on the wish list, but it might have already burned out as far as popularity. This would be useful. All-time peak of 10,344 people playing it. Today's peak is 1,077. So people are still playing it. There's still reason to play. Metacritic gave it an 89%. I definitely want to only spend close to 12 hours and far away from 55 hours of gameplay in it. It is a rogue-like game, but not really. It's a roguelite game because you do unlock new abilities that you can purchase at the beginning, new weapons. So yeah, I think Dead Cells would definitely have to be what I play first. That being said, Ghost, I kind of would be okay with leaving this. This looks like a better Metroidvania style animated game. So instead of playing on Epic, see, I kind of want to go back and see. This came out in 2014. This came out in 2016. So 2 years later, he made a better version of his own game, or game programming style at least. And then Mini Ghost came out a year later, and that's rated very positively too. And it's like an 8-bit Nintendo style game, and I'm not 100% sure I'd be willing to play that. Here, look at this. This is a direct reference. Let's see, how do you get the video to play from the beginning again? Okay, well, so this looks very much like he's drawing Jim Sterling, a somewhat famous, unfortunately, video game critic. So this has happened in several games, and it's mostly because I think of his unique fashion outfit style that he decided to draw. It's a cool idea though. What they're showing off right now is you can animate the different sprites of different of the main character. So if you wanted to play as yourself or draw a new character, that's kind of a cool idea. I even called it Jim Sterling. I listened to Jim Sterling a lot in the early days. Eventually I realized that he was scraping the bottom of the barrel of Steam to make controversy and cause and just highlight games that nobody would have ever seen in the first place, and then he would use that as an excuse to to kind of just attack Steam and say Steam is full of garbage, Steam is full of garbage, and it's like, no, you literally put in more work than is reasonable that anybody would ever do to find these awful games. There are awful games on Steam, but particularly since Steam Discovery 2.0, nobody sees them. Nobody gets recommended them. So they basically don't exist. And a lot of more things could be said about Jim Sterling, where he really is very much like so many other of the mainstream video game journalists, of which he was one, and then he went independent, and so he still kind of is just one, in my opinion, where they all have this groupthink problem where they all think the same. Some of the things they think I completely disagree with. One in particular is they push this narrative that all video gamers are toxic and bad, and that video games can exist without the video game fans in general. And so yeah, I just got tired of listening to him, frankly. Let's move forward. Next we have a point-and-click adventure game called Unforeseen Incidences that came out in 2018, 90% positive. I like this animation style. The camera zoomed out a little bit too far, but not too bad. So yeah, another point-and-click adventure game that I'll leave on the wish list. Next we have Unforgiving: A Northern Hymn. This one too is tagged with nudity. These are user defined tags, but they tend to be accurate. I've only seen one game where it seemed like, no, this is wrong, and that was like Paw Patrols, where they tagged it as like a psychological horror as a troll. If I was to guess, this is a first-person walking simulator horror game. Let's see. Based around Nordic myths. Sounds interesting. So yeah, I'll leave this on the wish list. Angry Demon Studio. They've got a new game that needs to be on the follow list that is probably brand new. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually a continuation of the story, but maybe it isn't. Yeah. So at least I've found one new game to add to the follow list. That's what part of what we're doing here is trying to fill in gaps and find. Yeah, this looks like a very different type of game than the one. Seems like this developer is a fan of the Nordic gods, and they're making all their games around that idea, even though this is clearly a sci-fi setting in the future. But I like the Nordic gods too, so as a story framing device, I think a lot of the more pagan gods of the old should be researched and covered. Far too many games are based around the exact same stories, and if you're just telling the same stories based off of like Christianity references, or maybe some Japanese mythology references, or a lot of Hans Christian Andersen Central European references, that they've all been played out a lot, and you might as well just write new stories at that point if you're not going to do anything unique with it. Next we have Unhack, which is a anime puzzle visual novel game. It's rated 92% of 144 reviews. I don't think that this is just a visual novel game, though. I think it's kind of a simple puzzling game on top of that. So when something is tagged as a visual novel and it has some other mechanic like a puzzle game, I tend to not call it a visual novel at that point. I only call games that are 100% or almost 100% visual novel games visual novels. So I'd say this looks like it is a puzzle game of some sort with the characters and the story added on top of them. This has historically been as low as 99 cents. Apparently there is a complete bundle here, and I wanted to see what this developer has made otherwise, so interesting. Invert mouse is an interesting spin on a name for a developer. Let's see, what else have they made? Without Within 3, which is a visual novel anime series. The Last Birdling, which is another visual novels. Like, sadly, the wish list is just gonna have so many visual novels, and I really can't do anything to remove them until I make some decisions there. The same way that the wish list is full of RPGs that I really didn't make any decisions on. Well, I'm gonna leave this for later, and I'll just look at all these visual novels and see if I end up adding a bunch of them. But I did want to see Unhacked 2. Apparently that isn't on the wish list. 95% positive. At this point it does look like it pretty much is just a visual novel, though. They're getting away from the puzzle aspects, or puzzle aspects have changed. Like, so yeah, it's different experience here. And yeah, I guess there's not much else to say here. Just leave it at that. Unhack 1 and 2. It's on the wish list. I don't know if I was actually going through my wish list, I'd ever actually see these on sale during a Steam sale. The thing that would have to happen is I'd have to sort by discount. This would have to be like 90% off, or it would have to just be so discounted that it was really cheap, and then I sorted by price. Otherwise, so many other games would be on the wish list first, and I would definitely think of something else that I'd prefer to own. I'm trying to stay mostly away from just buying the cheapest of the cheap thing that's available for sale, in favor of some more AA titles, things that I've been wanting to play for a very long time, things that I'm very interested in. Here we have another one called Unholy Disaster. It's tagged action, anime, sexual content, and nudity. Again, so another adult game. Next we have Unholy Night, which is 90% positive. It's a tower defense management game. This one, I'm not 100% sure why this is on the wish list. Unholy Heights is the name, not Unholy Nights. So the idea of a sim tower apartment management game mixed with a tower defense game with this style of art, which is a little simplistic for my taste. And then there are monsters that live in the hotel management that you're managing, and I guess you then upgrade their living space and it makes them stronger. I don't like that this demo has a bunch of mouse cursors on it, but whatever. So then the invaders come in at the ground floor, and the defenders come out of their apartment to defeat them, and you don't want them to make it to the roof. I don't know about this one. This seems a little ridiculous. Let's see. It's been as low as 99 cents. At 99 cents, it might be something I'd spend like 30 minutes on to show off, but I don't know how long I'd really want to play it. See if we can find some reviews. Literally does not work. Not a very helpful review. because that could just be your computer. Let's see here, we have an incredibly long review. The game itself sounds better off as an idle game somewhat, but unfortunately alt-tabbing even with the game's small window pauses the entire thing. It was pretty nice trying to be a landlord for monsters, but with how tediously bland progress is, I can't entirely like this game even for its cheap price. Yeah, I think I need to have some higher standards, and like, while I did like Plants vs. Zombies, that's barely a tower defense game. It's its own unique thing. I think in general tower defense games are not something I do want to play. Kind of in the same way I don't want to play RPG Maker games. So yeah, this is going to get removed and move forward. Next we have a game called Unium. Draw a line, a single line. How hard can this be? This is one of these Unity single screen puzzle games where you're on the same screen and you're just given puzzles. It's rated 95% positive. I suppose I should be a little bit careful where this might be like an achievement game or something like that, or a trading card game. I could play this certainly for a short time, but I'd probably get bored like almost every small Unity single screen game I play that's puzzle games. I get bored and don't want to cover them all the way to the end. This is $1.99. It's been as low as 60 cents. That's the right price, certainly. It has 22 achievements, which isn't too high, so it doesn't really feel like an achievement game. It's had one person play it today, but I guess that really doesn't matter. Let's see. An unexciting and frustrating puzzle game. That's kind of not that helpful, because the puzzle game's never going to be exciting, and frustrating is kind of subjective to the player. Of course, I could certainly review this game and say it's frustrating too. It's just that frustration is an emotion. It's not something that you can place as an attribute to the game itself. I can express my frustration in ways and say, oh, this gameplay design is poorly designed, or the mechanics require me to do a lot of repetitive actions, or it takes a lot of my time and doesn't respect my time as a player. This is from a developer who's made like 4 other games that I think all of them have been on the wish list. So this is going to stay on the wish list too. Next we have Unleash, which this is just barely on the edge of the number of reviews I like to see, over 25. This came out relatively recently as of recording, and that's why it was on the wish list in the first place. Now that it's mixed, it's pretty obvious that I don't want this on my wish list. I don't really even have to go that far. It's a tower defense game. It's a little bit flashy. That flashiness certainly might have played some roles, and like, don't get tricked by these trailers, because that's not what this game looks like. It looks like this, and mostly that means you're not going to be able to see anything because of the flames getting shot out and the lightning getting shot out. It's kind of brand new, and it's already been as low as $6.99. So yeah, Unleashed gets removed. Pretty much all tower defense games should be removed. It would have to be a pretty special one for me to want to cover it. Next we have Uno. We're talking about special ones I want to cover it. This is probably not something I would actually buy, but I certainly remember playing this on Xbox 360 and people enjoyed it quite a bit. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but certainly it's not getting reviewed very well. So let's see what the reviews are. Like, it's been as low as $2.51, but then you might have to buy another $5 in DLC if you want more skins. I think Uno Rush is also missing here, and see, that's kind of a problem because Uno Rush was the game I was playing more. Uno Rush, unlike Uno, allows you to organize your cards in your hand, and if a card is playable and it's like on the left side, it will just automatically play. So if you've got this long chain of say 12 cards and every single one is playable on the one to the left of it, you will automatically play them all and win in one turn. You still have to say Uno or somebody will challenge you, and then you have to draw 4 cards. So like Uno Rush speeds up the game quite a bit. It's a lot more fun in my opinion, but it's not on Steam. But I do like Uno in general, although in all fairness, Tabletop Simulator almost certainly would work better and give you a lot more other styles of games you could play than buying Uno. But you don't get that polish, if there is polish here. You don't get these custom cards, you don't get a polished interface that knows what the players are doing and don't allow for cheating. Let's see, here we have, get this game if it's on sale and get at least 3 friends to join you. Don't buy this game alone unless you want to play online or against bots. The game has many cons such as crashing before loading a game or servers being slow. Also, the price of the game is dumb as it is. The only pros is making your friends feel like in Mario Party, ruining your Uno and getting you 16 cards. Ubisoft servers are horrible. The support is useless. You can't play it with your friends unless you have, because internet problems. How did Ubisoft mess up Uno? It's Uno. So yeah, it's definitely questionable. Maybe I should bump this down to the follow list. Yeah, seems like Ubisoft servers are the problems here. Yeah, I should bump this down to the follow list. This is a bigger problem for me in particular, is this: I just never would have 3 friends that had the same schedule as me, so I wouldn't be able to play this even if I did get it, except for against bots, and I really wouldn't probably cover it for very long. This would be like a 30-minute spotlight for me to just come back and say, actually you shouldn't buy Uno because the servers suck. Next we have a game called Unpossible. Is this a racing game? Parkour game? Guess I'm gonna have to watch the video. Okay. Seems like it's a parkour game. It doesn't have VR or anything. Now, I'm not prone to motion sickness, but honestly, even after a while, I think I'd probably not be too happy with playing a game that looks like this. It looks like an interesting challenge, but on the other hand, it also looks like it is, for the most part, just an asset flip game. The skybox is probably just pre-purchased. These textures and these objects, very possibly pre-purchased. And all the game developer would really have to do is say, randomly generate something at a certain angle, and then generate the next segment and generate the next segment. It would really come down to how much polish each of these levels really are. You will die often and it will always be your fault. It's not a description I generally want to see in a video game. And this doesn't seem like it goes anywhere or does anything different. It seems very much like you either use your mouse to go left and right or a controller. And if I was using a mouse leaning left and right like that, I think I'd probably not enjoy it very much. Let's see. See if we can get some reviews to... it's okay, nothing really special about the game. It gets repetitive incredibly quickly. Mouse cursor is always visible when playing. Motion sickness, avoid this game. Yeah, it feels like there's enough negative reviews here to confirm my own trepidation against Impossible. We'll throw this developer a bone and see if there's something else they've made that might be worth looking at. Zombie Training Simulator. This looks like a straight up VR game. And standing in one place shooting zombies game. I kind of like the cardboard cutout flat cartoony animation style here, but yeah, this is kind of nothing too. Alright, and I think we're getting close to the end. Next we have Unto the End. Well, I guess that's an ironic name. Coincidental. This isn't out yet, so I can just put it on the follow list. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Moving forward. Next we have a game called Untouchable. It isn't at the 25 review point yet, so I don't have to really consider it yet. I'll just throw it on the wish list and wait a year because it came out in 2018. Honestly, if I was to look at this, it looks pretty rough, and it looks like it's from a Chinese developer, or maybe a Japanese developer. And certainly I do have different feelings whether it's a Chinese developer or Japanese developer just on the experience I've seen for the games I've seen on Steam. But I don't really have to make a decision again, so yeah, to the follow list that goes. Next we have another Metroidvania game. We've seen quite a few. This one's called Unworthy. I don't know if this black and white art style will work for the entirety of playing a game like this, because I assume this is a pretty long game. It's 86% of 197 reviews. Looks like it is a 2D Dark Souls type idea. It looks kind of fast paced and somewhat doable. So I think I could probably make it to the end, unlike many Dark Souls style games. So yeah, I'll leave this on the wish list. Next we have Up Left Out, a puzzle about unlocking stuff. This is another single screen Unity games. Yeah, not a very descriptive description here, but it looks like it's a puzzle game that I could figure out and play. It's 99 cents right now, so it's not asking too much. So yeah, this can stay on the wish list. Next we have Upwards Lonely Robot. Now this is 92%, but it has only 14 reviews, so I gotta be a little bit more cautious. Like, certainly, since not a lot of people have played this could be boring, or this could be alright. Like, if the idea is it's a platformer going up a building, there are mobile games sort of like this. This could also just be really, really bad. The good news is that this is not just a cheap cell phone port, or if it is, it's a highly polished cell phone port, so again, not a cheap one. It doesn't look bad. It also kind of seems like this just goes on forever, so this would be probably a game that I definitely wouldn't want to pay $9.99, but $1.45 sounds right. I think I'd probably play this for like 30 minutes and show it off. It's all-time peak of 4 people. Let's see. The game is flat out boring. There isn't anything exciting about climbing a tower. You gain no abilities or anything, you just jump up. The game tries to add variation and throws a couple new obstacles here and there on you, but dodging a snail with jumping isn't different from jumping over another insect. It's It's basically only a race against time, and you add time by collecting fruit. It's no depth. Yeah, I think I'm convincing myself to keep this on the wish list, and after reading that review, I think I've convinced myself not to. Like, as pretty as this might look, it is basically a game demo more than a game. This is something that would have been a cool mission in another game. So I'm gonna remove it, but I'll throw this developer a bone and see if maybe there's something else that they've developed that might catch my eye. So we have very positive, mixed, the Metronomicon, Slated Dance Floor, I believe that's on the wish list. Project High Rise, I think I looked at that. So this feels like a case of where I opened every game this developer made and put a bunch of them on the wish list, and shouldn't have done that. Okay, so that's leaving. Next we have a game called Urban's Clans Card Battle. This is brand new, so I can just put it on the follow list. Thought we were close to the end. I guess I've done that every time though. It's like I have very poor judgment as far as how close to the end we are. Next we have a game called Use Your Words, which is a local multiplayer game, so I probably couldn't actually play it. Let me think about what this is. Let's see. Yes, this feels very much like a party game that you just can't. You can't really play. It's another one of these games where you can play it on the. You play on the cell phones. Each person's cell phone works, and that's a cool idea. The Jackbox Party Pack also has that. This really is a game I think I went on my wish list just for my own personal use. Like, unless I had streamers playing at the same time and there's some online connectivity like the Jackbox Party Pack, which there might not be. It may very well be a case that this game only works with people connected on the same local area network and not through the internet. That might be the way this works. So I'd have to do some more research. Of course, this is also this game is played locally, but remote players can play via stream or video conference. So it does say you can play via stream, but then this is also dirty, a dirtier game, adult kind of game. So again, if I was streaming this, maybe I probably couldn't say half the things that were being typed in. What else has this developer made? Nothing. Yeah, I'm really having to bend over backwards to keep this on the wish list. This is from the developer who I didn't know there was a second angry video game, nerd game. I don't think I'd play that actually, because I didn't like the first game. It sucked. It literally sucked, and I feel like that was half the joke. But then you can't make a sucky game just as an homage to the fact that so many of the old games suck. Yeah, so I'm gonna close this tab. Like, I don't even care that the sequel exists. There's also some weirdness in covering a game that is based off of another YouTuber content creator. And we're done. Good. So that wasn't incredibly long, but I still managed to turn it into 2.5 hours of footage. Yeah, had I just burned through the list of games, we would have been done probably in 1.5 hours. But I feel like I gave every game a good chance we're making a decent amount of changes to, considering how few there actually were to cover. And I imagine for the rest of the letters in the alphabet and the rest of the Steam wishlist, of which you can see our scroll bar is here, I imagine this is kind of how it's going to go. Just relatively short and sweet. That's it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. When you subscribe, please click the notification bell. If you want a friend or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Google+, Steam, or Battle.net, all of those links are down below. And there's two ways I'd ask you to consider supporting me. You can support me through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can friend me on Steam and just gift me a game off the wishlist or a game you would like to see me cover. Or if you don't want to make a decision, you can also gift gift cards, which would be very helpful. That way when a sale comes around, I can just buy the games I'm most interested in. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.